Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our webinar this evening, our BAPO Educator Network launch. My name is Aoife Healy, and I'm Education Practice Development Consultant with BAPO. I'm just going to be introducing tonight's webinar. So we're here to celebrate the launch of the BAPO P&O Clinical Educator Network and the supporting resources that have been developed. The webinar will mark the launch with an overview of the work. We'll introduce some guest speakers talking through the resources that BAPO have produced over the last year. I'd like to firstly introduce Dr. Beverly Durant, who leads this work. Bev is a consultant and expertise in health and education. She's the founder and director of Victus Healthcare Solutions and co-founder and director of the Creative Health Alliance. She has been an allied health professional for over 25 years with a clinical and leadership career within the NHS and also an extensive academic profile within higher education. For this evening's webinar, Bev will introduce the network, bringing in our guest speakers to introduce the resources, Dr. Joe Watson and Gemma Cassidy, and we'll have an opportunity at the end for some questions from our attendees. So I'll pass it over to Bev. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you, Aoife. So welcome, everybody. It's lovely to have so many of you registered for this event. And I know that we've got participation from the UK and internationally. So welcome to everyone. We have a real smorgasbord of resources that we're going to be sharing with you tonight. And the work that we're going to be talking about, the Educator Network, has come from funding from NHS England. And I have to say there's been a phenomenal amount of work that's gone on creating resources for the prosthetic and orthotic profession, covering a wide range of topics from supporting our support workers to contracting services to simulated learning and you name it, everything in between. The project closes at the end of this month, and so we're absolutely delighted to be sharing some of the outputs with you tonight. But I might add what you're going to see tonight is a fraction of what has been achieved. So please sit back, enjoy, and without further ado, let me explain how things are going to roll this evening. So I'm not sure if everyone has access to the chat function, but if you do, please do say hello to each other in the chat. There's probably too many of you to go through a formal introduction, but please do say hello to each other in the chat. And whilst you're doing that, I will introduce you to us, just to recap on where Aoife left off. So yeah, thanks for the introduction, Aoife. So I'm Bev Durant. I'm leading the work on the educator workforce. And as Aoife said, I'm 1/3 of the Creative Health Alliance. And my colleague, Dr. Joe Watson, on the right of your screen, is also co-director. And Joe and I and our third director, Dr. Stephanie Tempest, have worked with BAPO, delivering a large proportion of this NHSE funded project. And in the centre of your screen is Gemma Cassidy, and Gemma is a prosthetist orthotist, works for BAPO as the EDI and Wellbeing lead and also works independently. And you will have noticed that both Joe and I are not prosthetists or orthotists. I'm a podiatrist and Joe is an occupational therapist. However, we know the AHP landscape very well and bring, as Aoife pointed out quite scarily, many years of experience to the table in academic, clinical and leadership settings. So we're well placed to deliver this programme of work. So I'm just going to outline what we're going to be doing this evening. So we've got just over an hour and a half, just under an hour and a half together this evening. And we're going to be covering the following topics. So the Educator Network is a newly formed network, and we mailed you once we had the network established back in November. And one of the things we did was to ask you to complete a survey, which was to outline your aspirations, your wishes for the network, and your long and short-term goals. So we're going to be talking about those survey findings this evening. We're also going to explore the BAPO Educator web pages. They're not live at the moment, so you're just going to get a little preview. They go live on Friday, and I'll remind you of that a little bit later. And then Gemma's going to be launching her Learner Welcome Pack, and we're going to have a chat with Gemma about the work that she's been doing. We're going to be talking to Joe about preceptorship and pre-preceptorship and the Learner Hub resources. And then I'm going to give you a preview of a simulated escape room that we have developed to support learners in practice. So quite a lot to get through. So let me tell you a bit more about the background and the setup of the Educator Network. So the Educator workstream actually covers our practice educators and our academic educators and the wider, broader scope of practice education. But the Educator Network was something that we wanted to set up specifically for educators in practice. And these were some of the things that we were asked to do. So set up and develop a BAPO Educator Network, produce a 12-month plan to pilot the functionality of the network, and that was to include compiling the membership database. And I'm delighted to say that we have so far 60 members to this network, which is brilliant for such an early stage in its development. Produce and deliver a network launch event. So here we are. A survey to the membership to establish hopes and wishes for the network, and we're going to be talking about that in a minute. Produce and launch the Educator web pages, which we'll preview a bit later, and offer peer support and encourage you to share your expertise with 2 hosted webinar events. And so we did mail out about that in November, and we have had some interest. So those 2 events will happen over the next 12 months. And then a few other things that we wanted to achieve, and that was really to encourage you to share your outputs with the wider professional community as part of promoting careers, and that was specifically related to linking with the education pillar of practice. And then encourage members of the network to consider and explore with education providers how they could offer educationally focused practice placement experiences. So part of this work is trying to increase the breadth of practice-based learning to work across all 4 pillars. And obviously for the Educator work stream, that was around education. And then to work collaboratively with BAPO education officers and the membership, existing and growing, to nurture and strengthen the focus on engagement, building sustainable commitment and ownership. And that's owning this network. So we really want you to feel like it's your network. And that's all quite wordy. So, you know, if we look at what does that actually mean? So essentially, we wanted to build a resource to help support you as practice educators to support our learners in practice-based learning environments. It's really important to say that everything that we're going to share with you tonight is to complement, not replace what you already have in place. So it's very much about, you know, adding to and sharing, you know, centrally, but it doesn't replace anything that you currently have. And our academic colleagues from our education providers will have lots and lots of different resources in place for their learners. So again, it's about complementing all of that. So we wanted to provide the network for you as practice educators to share your ideas, offer peer support, and provide a central point of contact, and to be supported collaboratively by BAPO. But essentially, the network is hosted by BAPO, but it is owned by you. We want you to tell us how you want this to shake out, what do you want to it to look like, and how can we support you develop a network that serves your needs as practice educators. So we're just going to spend a couple of minutes now looking at the survey. So this was a short survey that was sent out. I've got two screens, so I'm glancing to my right occasionally. This survey was sent out back in November when the network was first established, and we asked you your primary reasons for joining the network. So these are some of the things that you told us. Collaboration and idea sharing, workforce improvement, so continue to improve the workforce through education, benefits to specialists and patients, enhance the practice for orthotics and prosthetics specialists and patients. Learning and development, gain a better understanding of being an educator and P&O. Professional networking, skills advancement, access to valuable resources, training and discussions to stay updated on the latest techniques, innovations, including printed technology. So I don't know if we deliver on that one, but it's lovely to have it on the list. And then student and graduate management. I think this is about supporting more than it is necessarily about managing, but this is about our students and graduates that join the trust and health boards up and down the country, so supporting them. And then the next thing we asked you was about your short-term goals. So obviously there is some overlap here, but some of these I really love. So skills improvement, enhance skills as an educator and encourage others to participate. So one of the things that we really want to try and encourage is, we know for P&O, we need to increase the number of practice educators, and we know that we haven't got sufficient to be able to reach the numbers that we need to try and get to in terms of expanding our practice-based learning placements for learners. To do that, we need to have skilled and trained educators. So it's lovely to see that is a short-term goal. Professional connections, again, there's a lot in here about providing support for each other and peer support, which is lovely to see. Develop tools, pathways and protocols to aid current education. So, I mean, hopefully you're going to get some of these resources tonight, which will help you do that. Confidence building. So use services to improve experiences and feel more confident as an educator. And that's so important because, we're saying we want to support learners and make sure our learners feel confident and supported when they go into practice-based learning environments. But also on the other side of the fence is the educator that receives the learner, and that's as important for you to feel comfortable and confident in that role. So the long-term goals then, let's have a look at these. So student and apprentice integration, consider taking on more students and apprentices. So this was like a big tick from me because I'd love to see this happen, and I'd really love to see students and apprentices together, learning together. I mean, that I'm sure some of that already happens. But consider taking on more, and some of the other work that I've been doing has shown that there is, the model for P&O is based around a sort of one learner, one educator. But actually there's really good evidence now that peer supported learning works really well for learners to have each other to support in practice-based learning. So that was lovely to see. Patient care improvement, so apply advancements to improve patient care and stay at the forefront of the field. So this point, whilst it may not be directly related to the function of the educator network, I think it is important to acknowledge that obviously as educators, you're educating the next generation of prosthetists and orthotists. And, we need to hand the baton on and hope that they are better than us. I love to think that the next generation is going to be doing a much better job than I've done, and I would encourage that. So that's nice to see. Comprehensive improvement. So I love this one. Review and improve educational practice from top to bottom for all stakeholders. So that's a great long-term aspiration to have. And if we could achieve that, it'd be fabulous. Knowledge sharing, help each other and increase collective knowledge. Yeah, we're definitely stronger together. And professional development, so increased placement capacity and competence in the UK. And then briefly, we're just going to have a look through at some of the support and resources hoped from the network. So here we can see a lot more about support and sharing. So sharing resources, access to shared learning resources. So certainly you're going to get that from this program of work. Communication, guidance, and advice on available resources for learners and students and apprentices. Forums and collaboration, up-to-date materials, technological support. Well, hopefully we might be able to do that, but I think that is about you sharing your advances with each other as much as it is about what BAPO might be able to provide you with. Professional interaction, again, opportunities for communicating and talking and sharing, guidance and support, staff development resources to aid staff in retention and development. So again, all of this work we've been doing on this program sort of taps into sustainability in various different ways. And I think we do know that for prosthetics and orthotics, there is a problem with retention. And so hopefully all of this work comes together to support the greater good and improve that retention picture. And then again, a bit more about peer support. So access to peer support and helpful resources. So that will certainly be happening. And also, there is the mentorship program, which we've now linked with educators in practice. So visit that resource as well. Okay, so we're going to just pause there in proceedings for a moment, and I'm going to stop sharing and just to web share the Educator pages. And this is just to say that the live date for the web pages to go live and for the simulation resource is Friday the 21st, so this Friday coming. So I'm just going to stop sharing that for a moment and reshare. Here we go. So hopefully you can see this. So this is the Educator Workforce page. And what you'll see scrolling by at the top here are lots of lovely quotes from our educators. So this page is for everybody, including our academic educators. So this is the sort of landing page. And then if we scroll down here, there's a little welcome note, what you're going to find. And then there's a tab for you guys, the Educator Network. So we'll just have a look at that. So there's a welcome note here and a way of joining the network. And then as time progresses, we'll add more to this page. But we're just going to go back to the main page and show you where the resources are. So here, there will be a Padlet, which is just a way of displaying information. So this is going to contain lots of published information for educators that's already out there, but it brings it into one place for you. And then if we have a look at these educator resources, so we've got one I was talking about needing to embed the education pillar. So the part of that is to socialise the AHP Educator Career Framework, which was published early this year. And on the webinar tab here, you'll see that there is a webinar about that framework. And also on here is the support worker framework, curriculum guidance. There are a series of presentations in this tab for, these are support worker introductory presentations, but they're pitched at level 4-5. So actually pre-registration learners might find that useful. So they're all, there's 5 or 6 of them on under that tab, and they're voiceover presentations. So have a look at those when it all goes live. And there's the work that Gemma's been doing on equality, diversity and inclusion. The webinar page, so there are some resources on there. This is being recorded, so that will appear on there. And there's some relevant webinars that are already on there. And then this is our simulated escape room, which we're going to demo in a minute, so we won't go into that one. And then here are case studies. So some of you on the call will recognise some of these case studies. So we mailed out to the network and asked you to, well, we asked you a series of 8 questions that you responded to. And so each of those are on here. So thank you so much for your contribution there, and your claim to fame is right here. So encourage everyone to have a look at that. Okay, so that is the Educator web pages. So I'm going to stop sharing. That all goes live on Friday. Okay, so next up then, we are now going to have a chat with Gemma. So I'd like to welcome Gemma Cassidy, who, as I said, is the EDI and Wellbeing Lead at BAPO. So can you hear us all okay, Gemma?
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you, yeah.
Brilliant.
Okay, so Gemma, you've been doing some really important work for BAPO on this project. So why don't we start off with just having a little bit of an overview of what you've been up to over the last 12 months?
Yeah, so it's really been sort of a two-pronged approach. So part of the project has been to embed EDI into all the other projects that we've been undertaking for NHS England. So it's great to have that opportunity to talk through some of the EDI content tonight as well. And then the actual project that I was focusing on was to look at inclusive practice in higher education and how that benefits disabled learners and ultimately reduces the attrition risk in our disabled learners. And so I've kind of understood the actual concept of inclusive practice, and at its core really it's about removing those barriers for disabled learners, but also for underrepresented groups in higher education. And what we're looking at is reducing the cognitive and emotional loads that are placed on learners from minoritized groups. So if we look at the example of disabled learners, they'll be navigating societal and educational barriers that non-disabled learners may not face. And the inclusive practice provides learners with that supportive environment to encourage everyone to reach the highest potential. And the idea really with inclusive practice is to reduce the need for things like reasonable adjustments, because inherently the environment is already inclusive by design. If we can reduce the attrition risk in our P&O learners, it's going to be really important due to, you've just briefly mentioned the challenges we've got in the profession in terms of adequate staff numbers, but also that higher attrition risk that we have in the P&O workforce in the first 4 years after graduation. So some of my findings, I'll just go through a few and then we'll look at the learners pack that we've produced. So the Higher Education Statistics Agency, they indicated that in the year 2021 to 2022, higher education learners with a specific learning difficulty or a mental health condition formed 61% of disabled learners. And 32% of all disabled learners had a specific learning difficulty such as dyslexia, dyspraxia or ADHD. So we need to be aware of these broad statistics for higher education so that we can better understand and support our learners And part of that is also looking at transition support, because obviously in times of transition it can be a time of higher stress on learners generally. So what we also looked at focusing on was a key transition, which would be practice-based placements. And during my discussions with disabled P&O learners that I had during the project, it really highlighted to me the importance of providing that support for disabled learners, because they might face additional barriers compared to other learners. So from there, we sort of discussed, myself and Nikki Edison, the chair, how we could really enhance the support. And we've produced it's called the Learners Welcome Pack. But this is a pack that is for practice educators to share with their learners. And this is to share with all learners, those learners that are about to embark on the placement. And it's to be used as a useful tool for the practice educator to collate all that relevant information that's needed for their learners. So the learner has that information in one handy document, and it's given ahead of time. And it should also hopefully be used as a source of support for our learners who are embarking on those practice-based placements. And the aim really is to standardise the way that learners are receiving this information. It's also to try and raise awareness of and promote some open conversations between the practice-based educator and the learners about the challenges of learning, mental health and well-being, so including stress management and stress management strategies, considering EDI, so equality, diversity and inclusion. And there is also content within that pack about reasonable adjustments so that we can contribute towards an inclusive placement experience. And obviously there is a legal compliance there with the Equalities Act, that the practice-based placement has to provide reasonable adjustments for a disabled learner. So that's it in a nutshell, Bev.
Fabulous. That sounds wonderful. And I think, am I right in saying that this is now a live document? So I think we can share the link, can't we, to it?
Yes.
Yes. So I think the link you should be able to find in the chat. So it's called the Learner Welcome Pack. So this is specifically aimed at learners in practice settings. And so it's kind of bridging that gap with the practice educator and the learner to better understand. So you touched on kind of two groups there. So disabled learners, specifically around reasonable adjustments, and then mental health and well-being. So do you want to just tell us a little bit more about what's in the pack for those two groups?
Yes, sure. So if I start with reasonable adjustments, because when I've conducted the project, when I start to talk about inclusive practice, first of all, straight away, when I'm talking to the higher education institutes or with learners, it tends to focus around reasonable adjustments. So as I just mentioned, there is information about legal requirements for practice educators to provide those reasonable adjustments. That's all embedded in the document. And when a learner discloses a disability or a health condition, the practice placement must make those reasonable adjustments in line with the Equalities Act 2010. And that's to ensure that the disabled learner is not disadvantaged in accessing their learning and assessment. And a way to implement reasonable adjustments might be a placement support plan. So this could be a placement specific, well, it should be really a placement specific, a person specific and a role specific plan. And it might be beneficial to utilise the higher education reasonable adjustment plan if there is one. And that could be a foundation for the placement reasonable adjustment plan. So an example might be if there's been a specific P&O reasonable adjustment made at university, for example, if using the workshop machinery or when rectifying casts, that same adjustment can quite easily then be transferred to the placement setting. And it's really important to have these reasonable adjustment plans or RAPs in place, ideally before that placement commences, so that it enables the learner to really maximise their learning experience on placement and to gain the most out of the experience. So that's the reasonable adjustments in a nutshell. and they're all directed. There's lots of live links in there as well in terms of ways of actually communicating a reasonable adjustment plan. And it can also be not just for disabled learners, but also for learners who might have caring responsibilities or religious adjustments that might be needed. So there's different documents to actually be able to share that with the placement educator.
That sounds really useful, and thank you, Gemma, for outlining that. Do you think, I just want to raise something here. I mean, do you think there could be a danger around confusion here, particularly if HEIs potentially might already be providing information on reasonable adjustments? Do we need to make the distinction about how this might be different to what is already happening in higher education, and actually this is a supporting pack that you've produced here?
Yeah, definitely. So the idea is this learners pack, the aim is not to surpass that or to cross over or confuse in any way, but it's to provide a complementary support for the learners and also for the practice educators. And really within the pack, there's encouragement for the learner to disclose a disability, because during the project research, I've found that there is still, you know, sort of a stigma attached or a fear of disclosure in terms of disclosing a disability, not across the board, but certainly in the sort of the desk-based research. So it's really about communicate to the learner that it's in their own benefit and also the benefit of their service users and their education to disclose any sort of disabilities or challenges. And it's really a reference as a general guidance, and it embeds prompts for the educator staff as well to ensure that those open conversations are had with regards to any requirements for reasonable adjustments, and also really that there is that option to utilise and repurpose that higher education wrap. You know, if that's already there and embedded, there's key learnings that can be transferred into the placement setting, and to use that as a foundation for the placement support. And it also includes an infographic that we've produced as part of this project on some potential reasonable adjustments and considerations to provide an inclusive placement environment. And then, as previously discussed, it has signposts to different ways of sharing reasonable adjustments as well.
Yeah, thanks, Gemma, for explaining that. And I think actually, you know, whatever the resource or whoever the target audience is for the resource, I think that there's a wider audience, isn't there? Because if we produce something for a learner, then, you know, the practice educator needs to know about that as well. So I think there's learning on both sides, isn't there? And certainly, you know, with the resources we're sharing, it's I mean, I've learned an awful lot producing these resources. So I think there's learning for everybody, isn't there, in all of this work?
Definitely. And that's some of the recent feedback we've had actually from a practice educator was about around the learning model that's embedded in there, that they felt like they'd learned, more detail from that. So that's really nice to hear that hopefully we're providing a little bit of education or just a sort of reflective space for educators to think about some of the subject areas for the learners.
Yeah.
And then, the mental health and well-being side of things. So that was another key area that we really wanted to embed, again, because of those kind of key learns from the listening sessions. So we wanted to really embed that kind of element of support for the learner. And part of my work as the wellbeing lead is to sort of promote the fact that as allied health professional staff and learners, we have to understand that there is an additional emotional labour that comes alongside our clinical work. And that's because we're dealing with patients who could be in pain, they might have suffered traumatic injuries, they're dealing with complex long-term health conditions. So we know that there is an overlap between mental health and physical health. And NHS improvement data indicates that 30% of people with a long-term physical health condition also have a mental health condition, and that's 2 to 3 times the prevalence of the general population. And on the other side of that, we also know that 46% of people with a mental health condition have a long-term physical health condition. So really, we know that the learners coming into practice education environments, they need to adapt and acquire the skills to enable them to interact with their patients effectively and also holistically. And I know from my own experience and, you know, from peers, this can be a really steep learning curve. So we want this learners pack to raise awareness of the challenges that that new clinical environment can bring, but also to provide some of the support for that as well. So within the pack, we're encouraging learners to consider concepts such as engaging in a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset to enable them to maintain their well-being and gain the most out of the placement. And there's also signposting and links to well-being support, as well as information on stress management for them. And we also know from my sort of learnings from my project that there's been a marked increase in the number of learners in higher education with mental health conditions in recent years. So we wanted to open up that discussion of mental well-being during that new challenge or that new transition of a practice-based placement. And there's also some survey data from 2023, and that indicated that the top 3 reasons that allied health learners gave for considering leaving their course were the stress of the situation, the overwhelm of the situation, and lack of clinical confidence. So therefore, that structure and support that is given from the practice educator will be a real protective factor against these attrition risk factors. And we're hoping that this learners pack can contribute to that feeling of structure and support, not just for the learner, but also for the practice educator, because we appreciate that, you know, everybody is under sort of time pressures as well. So we're hoping that the practice educators will really find a benefit from this as well.
Yeah, I'm sure. And I think, you know, that's really important, isn't it, to acknowledge that actually we all could be affected by, you know, different stresses and, you know, mental health challenges in life. You know, life itself is complicated enough, isn't it? So I think it's a great resource, Gemma. I think it's going to be really well received. So anything else to say on the mental health or well-being side of things?
No, I mean, that's it in a nutshell. I can talk about it all day, but yeah, in a nutshell, that's it.
No, that's fantastic. Thank you so much, Gemma. So rounding off then, so obviously we've got some committed folk on the call with us tonight, but what do you think would be your take-home messages for our audience to go back and share that might inspire people to think, oh, I'm going to go and have a look at that?
Well, I'd say, you know, if we take it back to our, you know, standards of proficiency, so in line with the recently updated standards of proficiency for wellbeing in EDI from the HCPC, we hope that this learners pack can help practice educators and learners to consider the importance of wellbeing and inclusion, specifically more in the placement setting. So it's an easily editable document. So the idea mainly is to share it obviously digitally to encourage that clear communication and information provision. And it's really, there's those embedded prompts around consideration of well-being and inclusion for all learners on placement. And for the learners, we want them to have all the required information in one document, so it's kind of less stress and you know, it's easily to access really. And we want them to know that, and I'm sure practice educators, you know, are already very, you know, skilled in reassuring learners, but we want them to really be reassured that it's okay to find this practice setting challenging, but by accessing the support that's available to them and to, you know, openly communicate with their educator, that's really going to enable them to grow and thrive within this experience.
Wonderful. So and it's an open access resource, isn't it? So anyone can access it from its place on the website, the BAPO website.
So it's on the learners webpage, and it's also on the EDI webpage as well.
Wonderful. Okay, so please share widely. Gemma, it's been an absolute delight. Thank you so much. That's been really useful conversation, and I hope the audience found that useful. And the resources, yeah, please use them. Give us feedback about what you think of them. I'm sure Gemma will be pleased to hear. Yeah, thank you so much, Gemma.
Yeah, and it's going to be released on social media tomorrow, so also look out for that, and yeah, please share it so that we can get it used as widely as possible.
Great, brilliant. Thanks, Gemma. Okay, so next up then is Joe. So hello, Joe.
Hello.
Been waiting in the wings. So Joe, you've done a mountain of work on this NHSE funded project. So I'm just picking out your work on preceptorship and the learner support work streams. So give us an overview of what you've been covering.
Well, I'm going to squeeze in a third one if it doesn't trouble you too much, just because I think they all flow on really quite beautifully from Gemma's work. So the common theme in the work streams that I've been leading on is really about supporting those who are in the early phases of their careers and helping or contributing in some way to sort of solidifying and securing that initial workforce supply pipeline, which obviously builds on the things that Gemma was just talking about there. So one of the work streams has been specifically the learner support work stream, and that's had two elements to it. One has been the development of the BAPO Learner Hub web page, which I think Krista has just kindly popped a range of links in there for you. And that brings together a whole range of BAPO generated resources, as well as some others, signposting some others. And then within that work stream, we've also set up the brand new BAPO Learner Reference Group, which is just fantastic. And that's really a space that allows BAPO to develop closer working relationships with the learner community. So that's all about helping the organisation to better understand what's going on for learners and start to think about how, as an organisation, they can support learners and add value to their learning journey. So as Gemma said before, it's not about replacing stuff that education providers already make available to their learners, but it's about adding additional layers. The second work stream has focused on supporting BAPO to embed preceptorship within the profession and to embed pre-preceptorship within pre-registration curricula. And so we've done a whole range of work there, but it's really about trying to help the P&O community understand what are these things. I mean, the language doesn't exactly give a lot of way, does it? So understanding what it is, what the value of it is, not just to individuals, but also to services, to the quality and the safety of service delivery, and to the people who are accessing services, and also to the profession as a whole. And then the third work stream has been around foundation support, which is yet more new language for everybody to get their head around. But if we think about preceptorship as being primarily focused on building confidence at transition points in careers, foundation support is about building competence. So if we're talking about that transition from pre-registration learner into their first registrant role, preceptorship has a role in helping to manage some of those anxieties, that uncertainty that Gemma was talking about in pre-registration learners. That doesn't magically disappear when they get their graduation certificate. And then foundation support focuses on helping them to build their capabilities, to give them a really solid foundation for the growth of their career.
Fabulous, fascinating. So I think it's kind of you tell me. I mean, I think it's probably worth teasing out a little bit more on that. What do we mean by preceptorship? Because although we're sort of thinking about new graduates, it's kind of wider than that, isn't it? So do you want to say a little bit more about what we understand by preceptorship?
Yeah, and I wish there was another word that we could use for it. I think somebody would get a prize if they could come up with a different label for it. But I think we're stuck with it for the time being. But Preceptorship is a period of individually tailored and structured support that's provided to healthcare professionals at key moments of career transition. So the work that I've been leading on over the last 14 months or so has been pretty much focused on that transition from pre-registration learner to HCPC registrant going into their first clinical role. But it's also really relevant for people who are returning to practice after a long period away, for clinicians who've been internationally educated and they're beginning to work in the UK for the first time and trying to get their head around a new healthcare system and all those sorts of things. Or it can be really useful when people are transitioning to new work sectors or settings or that sort of thing. So, as I said before, the whole purpose of preceptorship is really about improving an individual's confidence as they move into that new role. So it's about supporting them to apply their established knowledge and skills to the greatest effect within that scope of practice that they're going into, and then to give them the confidence in themselves, in their abilities, to be able to go on to fulfill their individual potential. So usually speaking, it's recommended that it's around about a 12-month period, but that will very much depend on individual needs, going back to that definition about it being individually tailored and so on.
Mm. And I think some of the links that have gone into the chat will kind of further explain that, won't it? Because I think
absolutely,
certainly in the HCPC.
So there's a lot of guidance that's around. So we've got the NHS England's AHP preceptorship standards and framework, and also the HCPC principles of preceptorship. But last March 24, BAPO published the early career guidance framework. And if you want somewhere to start, that's a good place to start, because that brings together that national AHP sort of level guidance and contextualizes it within a P&O context.
Okay. And then I guess there's also something else in here. So just to further kind of challenge us on the use of words. So pre-preceptorship. Okay, so we're focused on pre-registration learners and pre-preceptorship. So tell us something about pre-preceptorship, Jo.
Okay, well, essentially pre-preceptorship is all about preparing pre-registration learners to confidently enter the registered workforce for the first time, and also to prime them so that they're ready to engage with these preceptorship programs that they will hopefully increasingly be encountering as newly qualified prosthetists and orthotists. So essentially, it sits largely within pre-registration programs, but it also encompasses that initial period of employment as a newly qualified practitioner. So it kind of provides a bit of a bridge between those two spaces, and it involves a range of learning opportunities and teaching activities that, alongside the sort of more obvious pre-registration education stuff that focuses on safe and effective practice, this is about providing sort of a firm foundation for people as they prepare to launch their professional careers.
Yeah, so all of the audience on the call tonight, so hopefully those resources will be useful for you in your current role, and please do share them widely. They're all freely available, is that right?
Well, so speaking specifically about pre-registration, the pre-preceptorship, largely that has the work that we've done there has really involved revising the BAPO curriculum guidance for pre-registration education, just to make sure that those concepts of preceptorship and pre-preceptorship are built in there. And I think it's probably fair to say that most pre-registration programs already include some of the things that we would put under the pre-preceptorship banner. So that might be things like helping people to prepare their CVs or zhuzh up their CVs and make them a bit more up-to-date and a bit more professional. It might be about helping them to work out what a good job application looks like or how to prepare for interviews, and collaborating with employers so that we make sure that actually what we're telling them is it wanted is actually what's wanted, and talking to them about what preceptorship is and maybe getting preceptors and preceptees, recent graduates have been through the program, and employers to come in and say, well, this is what it's going to look like in real life when you get out there. So there are a fewer pre-preceptorship resources per se, but we have developed a whole raft of preceptorship resources, and you will find those on the early career support webpage. And what we've tried to do is develop a range of things to help people to understand what preceptorship is and what it isn't, because that's really important as well, because there's a lot going on in those initial weeks and months of a new graduate entering their first registrant role. So we've developed some guidance for employers, for preceptors, and for new graduates about what's expected of them in relation to preceptorship. We've developed a preceptor learning needs analysis tool to help preceptors and their preceptees to kind of work out where do they need to focus their attention, where are the bits that if you're really honest you're not quite so confident about, and what can we do about those things. And there's a range of resources like case studies, like talking heads videos, like little quote cards that we've developed with the support of experienced people from the P&O community who are already embracing preceptorship, so that they can share their learning with other folk as well. So I'd really recommend having a good ferret about on that web page.
Yeah, and so just tell us what the web page is again.
This one is the early career support web page.
Okay.
So would you like me to quickly share that, or Krista's put the link in the chat. Fabulous.
Okay, that's brilliant. Yeah. So the other amazing piece of work that you've been doing, Jo, which I'd love to hear a bit more about, is the Learner Hub. Yeah. So tell us a bit more about that.
So the Learner Hub has really been brought together as a dedicated web page on the BAPO website, and it's intended to be a one-stop shop for learners, just to make it easier for them to access all of the resources that are going to be of greatest relevance to them. So there's resources that BAPO has generated, but we've also signposting resources that are more widely available as well. And again, you know, like the learner reference group, it's really about trying to build that stronger connection between BAPO as the professional body, the national professional body, and the learners who are joining the profession, and helping them to feel seen and feel valued, and to know that there's somewhere specially for them. And what we hope over, you know, the longer period is that will become a foundation for a career-long professional relationship with their professional body and ongoing membership of BAPO.
That sounds fantastic, and such a valuable resource. I mean, I can't believe what all of this work coming together. It just really shows how everything is interlinked and interrelated. So it's fabulous. Okay, so the other thing, so we were talking earlier about the fact that, you know, all of this work, you know, taps into sustainability at some level or other. And, you know, it strikes me that actually quite a lot of the work that you're doing, you know, really has that at its core. So what would you say are the key things about the work that you're doing around sustaining the profession?
I think it's critical. Gemma mentioned it before. You've mentioned it as well. It's absolutely the critical thing, and I think that it's really important that the entire community recognises that each individual, each service, each department, each organisation has a vested interest and a professional responsibility in supporting, the sustainability of the profession. And that involves supporting pre-registration learners to succeed on their program of study, whether it's an apprenticeship pathway or whether it's a BSc or a pre-registration master's. It means supporting new graduates through that transition so that they can confidently and safely take up their roles as registrants, and then they can go on to grow a career that is going to serve the public well, safely, effectively, and actually sustain the profession. Gemma said before, we've got, it's P&O is the smallest profession within the AHPs, and it has the highest attrition rate at 4 years post-registration, so we might be putting people in, but we're losing an awful lot very, very quickly. We're also losing people elsewhere along the pipeline because they're a little bit, I'd like something else, but that's another discussion about career development. And then we've got a group of people who are moving towards thinking about their retirement. That spells a real problem for the profession. So I would say to everybody on this call, please do whatever you reasonably can to support learners and to support them to succeed when they get to the point of that transition from higher education or from their pre-registration pathway into practice, by giving them realistic exposure to what it's going to be like when they get there. Don't leave it as a surprise for them once they get their registration certificate.
And that's an absolute key function of practice educators, isn't it? I mean, this Educator network, I really hope, is going to help foster that approach and make full use of all these resources. That's fabulous. Thank you so much, Jo, for sharing all of that brilliant work that you've done. So any final closing thoughts or ideas that you'd like to finish with?
I do have one. I do have one, because I was hearing you talk earlier about these webinars that the Educator Network is starting to think about. Goodness, what might that look like? What might be included in those webinars? Well, if you're really looking for something and you're not quite sure what you'd like to do, I have a couple of suggestions that I'd just like to drop into the mix for you to consider. One of the resources that we developed on the back of learner feedback that is available in the Learner Hub is about preparing for jobs in P&O. So when you go into the Learner Hub, if you go into the CPD resources section, you'll find the link to the lovely new resource there. And I think it's at the bottom of the list that Krista has dropped into the email. Perfect, Krista, thank you very much. And I would think that you could maybe host a webinar that helps to bring that guidance to life for pre-registration learners. If you're really enthusiastic, you could do 2 webinars maybe. You could do one on preparing your CV, and you could maybe think about doing one that is about preparing for interviews or something. So that would be a lovely way of sort of mentoring people who are approaching graduation. It would be a great, it's definitely part of the education pillar. It's part of your leadership pillar. And I think it would be a wonderful thing to consider. And if it was recorded, then, or if they, depending on how you go with it, there's an enduring resource there that would also be available for others at a future date. And there's a lot of material to work with within that document that has been prepared. So you wouldn't be starting with a blank page. You could bring all of that to life with illustrative examples. So that's my suggestion.
That's such a great idea. It's such a great idea because it kind of taps in again to, this idea that we're trying to, yes, we want to create, practice-based learning environments for our learners across the 4 pillars, but equally, our practice educators also can use these opportunities to build, their coverage of the 4 pillars. Yeah. Totally. Exactly. And I think when we mailed out earlier in November, we were saying about the leadership program that BAPO runs, and that, you know, as part of that program, you need to do a project. So actually, you know, if you wanted to use that opportunity, yeah, exactly.
We're ticking a number of things with a couple of activities here potentially.
Yeah. So that's fabulous. So I guess is the best, if there's anyone on the call that thinks, oh, that's a good idea, you wouldn't be alone doing this. I mean, that's the important thing to say. This is a supported offering through the network, but it's fully supported by the BAPO Secretariat and the education officers who will help you. And I'm sure that there is lots of support within the organisation to help you to do that. I'm just wondering, Aoife or Krista, is it worth putting in the right email address if anyone on the call was interested in doing that and picking that up? Can we provide an email address to be able to facilitate that? So there you go. If there's anyone on the call that wants to give that a go, then use the email address that's going to appear in the chat.
Yeah, and I would just add that, you know, I haven't plucked that out of nowhere, but what we do know from work that was done by BAPO last, so in 23-24, and work that was done at a national level, that some of the things that cause learners most anxiety and concern is around that stuff. You know, they don't know how to do it, or if they've done it before in a different context, they're like, oh, I'm sure different rules apply or different expectations apply. So you know, feeling unprepared for job applications and interview was the number one thing that was causing people anxiety. So it would meet a very real need for learners, be a valuable contribution to the broader range of resources that are developing over time. We haven't stopped the resource development thing. This is going to be an ongoing, we've had a big push just recently, but there will be an ongoing activity. And, you know, as you say, Bev, you know, really great learning opportunity for people within the Educator network potentially, or, you know, learning opportunity, but also sharing opportunity, their wisdom, their experience over the course of their own careers. So give it a thought.
Yeah, and if it's a recorded session, to share it for the rest of the network to have a look at as well. So wonderful. Yeah, that's a brilliant idea. Thank you so much for sharing that, Jo.
You're welcome.
Okay, so please, you know, browse and share and read all of those, follow those links that are in the chat. Yeah, Jo, thank you so much. That's been really helpful. And I'm sure the audience have got a lot from both Gemma and Jo. So thank you both. I think that's gone really well. And it's such, you know, both different topics, but, you know, so interesting and so important for us to hear about.
And very interrelated, really. It's kind of a continuum, isn't it? It's like we've got to look after the humans who are coming into this profession. You know, let's not forget that they're humans and they have anxieties and worries themselves, and give them the support that they need to be the best that they can be and to flourish in their careers, to strengthen the P&O workforce and what the profession can bring to the communities we serve.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, any final words, Gemma?
I think really just the fact that you're, you know, providing a sense of community here for the practice educators. And I think, you know, it is about looking after our humans, but it's about building that sense of community that I think, you know, sometimes in P&O that sense of community has been lacking. So the fact that, you know, this is here as the vehicle for the community is, well, it's just absolutely imperative. So well done, Bev.
Well done, everybody. Yes, fabulous. Right. Okay. So thank you both very much. So now we are going to revert back to, if I can find my share button, it's disappeared. Hang on a minute. I'm going to go back to our presentation. Because I'm now going to share with you. Okay, so now I can't see many people, but give me the thumbs up if you can see that. Brilliant. Okay, so next up then, work. Here we go. So next up is our simulated escape room. So again, this isn't live at the moment, but it will be by Friday. So this is a simulation resource, and we've built it as an escape room. And this is aimed at supporting learners going into practice-based learning environments for the first time. So it covers some core mandatory information. So there's 4 topics really that this covers. And they include data breaches, confidentiality and sharing information, record keeping, and communication. And again, I'm going to reiterate this point about the fact that this isn't about any replacement of any mandatory training that's already in place and required of learners. This is very much about supplementing that, complementing that, and adding to this being a freely available resource that you can direct your learners to consolidate what they might have already done, either with their education provider or via their e-learning for health account. Whatever mechanism is in place, this is there to add to rather than take away. Okay, so the idea behind this is that you're trying to get to a clinic room within this hospital setting, and there's in total 7 scenes, and you work your way through each room, and in each room there is information for you to look at and study, and then there's a series of questions that you need to answer, and once you've correctly done all of that and answered those questions correctly, then you can move forward into the next room, and eventually you find yourself in the clinic room, and there's a lot of information around record keeping and communication. So the idea is it's all in the giveaway title, so you have to escape from this challenge. So I'm going to show you in each individual scene. So I'm going to glance at my other screen over here. So if I'm turning away, that's why. So you should be able to see now. This is the point you arrive at. So this is the car park. And I'm giving it away here, but you're trying to get over there to that clinic. So when you arrive, this is what you see. And then you can click on here, and it gives you some information about the hospital that you've arrived at, what you need to do, what the expectation is that you're going to do, where you're going to end up, and an indicator of how long it might take you, and a little note there that if you don't manage to get the questions right, that you might be staying for the night shift. So it's a little bit lighthearted. And then the idea is that you follow these flashing tags, and the first one says you need to find the correct reception. So then you'd click on that, and then that one becomes active, and that's the podiatry clinic. So you'd click on that, and then that one becomes active. No, that's A&E. Oh, and there's a BAPO sign. So you would then click on that. I'm not going to do it. I'm going to move forward on a different screen, but that will take you to the next scene. So let's have a look at what that looks like. So this is the P&O outpatient reception area. And so there's a little information bulletin here asking you to look at these flashing tags. And this is about really lots of information in here for you to go and review. So if we just close that down and have a look at what's in here. So this is a little tag that says when you finish with this, you can click on the corner, which seems to have disappeared from this screen. But anyway, there's usually a little cross up here that you would click on to close this down. once you've finished with it, and the same applies to each of these. So there you go. So this little black cross here, rather than pressing your back button, you just close it down there. So there's lots of different types of information here. Some of it is in these kind of scroll boxes with a link that takes you off to an external place. And then if we look up here, this takes you through handling information. It goes through the 8 Caldecott principles, and then the link is also in there for you to go and further explore that. So you get the kind of picture, and you have to work your way through all of that information, and then you get the opportunity to move forward into the next room. So the next room you end up in is the data breach headquarters room, and that, again, there's a little welcome note there. And then this is more questions in here. So you've had the information in the previous room, and I guess it would be useful if you kept your browser tabs open as you progress through this, so that you're not going backwards and forwards. But the first thing you get pointed to here is this, which is this is a news article on Sky News about an actual cyber attack that did take place on an NHS trust last year. So you can hear about that. And then you go through, and there are different types of questions in here. Most of them are multiple choice, but some of them are centered around a scenario, and some of them are sort of explaining certain different. So the statements here, you have to pick out which correct statement applies, and you've got a scroll box there to scroll down. And then you would work your way through all of that different information. And there actually is, it's not playing now, but there actually is sound on this as well. So there's sound effects in all of these rooms. And then if we have a look, once you're out of that room, you end up here in our information hub. And again, it tells you what's in the room, and it gives you a few clues there about what to expect. And then the same process, things to look at, questions to answer. And then once you've completed and answered all those questions correctly, you then find yourself moving into the ultimate destination, which is the orthotic clinic. And in here, as I just pan around, it's quite a busy room. There's a lot going on in here. And so you just work your way through, following these flashing tags. And there's lots of different bits of information here for you to go and look at, links for you to explore, which takes you to the relevant information on the website. And then there's also these scroll bars here that gives you supplementary information, and then also gives you a further link to go and explore some more resources. Up here it says, so this is telling you that this is an optional video for you to watch. It's quite long, so it's about 45 minutes. So you might choose not to do that one, and you don't have to do that if you didn't decide to at that time. But if you did want to, this is all about the use of social media. So it's a really important topic for learners to get to grips with in a professional setting. So we're all used to using social media in our personal lives, but it's a different kettle of fish when you're in a professional space. And so there's a really good YouTube webinar to watch there about it. Again, and there we are. So you work your way around, lots of information in here, and then lots of different questions. And this covers all sorts of different communication. So this is picking up on Gemma's work. There we go. So this is tapping into the EDI and disabilities. And there's a link there again for you to go and explore further. And And then once you've navigated all that information, you then find yourself here, which tells you, brilliant, you've escaped, well done. Make sure that you document all your learning. You can return at any point if you need a refresher. And I think that's the great thing about this resource, actually, because although it's got a target audience of our learners going into practice education settings for the first time, it's equally good as CPD. You know, if you wanted to go in there and use it for a quick refresher, then that's a good thing to do as well. And then once you're through into this area, you can just click on that. And oh, can you hear that sound on there? Can you hear? No, you can't hear the bird sound. Right, okay. Let me just see if I can. There we go. Okay, so you get into this lovely back end of the hospital and hear all these lovely birds cheeping away. And there we go. You've done it. Great work, Bev. You are through. So I'm going to stop sharing that now. Do a quick time check. So we're on 7:15. So that resource actually, I think it's going to be really useful to learners and to our practice educators. This is going to be cross-shared. So it's going to be shared on Joe's Learner Hub pages. And it's also going to be on the Educator webinar and resources pages on the Educator web pages. So, and, you know, I think it has multiple reasons for being there, really, because it's, as I said, you can use it to refresh yourself so you've got a good understanding of what learners are being asked to cover. And you can use it yourself as CPD, or, you know, it's helpful perhaps for you to be able to kind of share learning, knowing what your learners have been looking at. You can perhaps use that as part of their placement experience. So I think I have stopped sharing my screen. Have I stopped sharing my screen? Yeah, okay. Fabulous. So that brings to a conclusion our presentations and our showcasing of our resources. So we've got a little bit of time left. And Gemma's, I don't know if Gemma is Gemma still there? Or I don't know if Gemma's on the call still or not. If she's not, then maybe she'll come back in a minute. She's gone, is she?
Yeah,
okay.
She's dropped off there.
Okay, so we've got a little bit of time for Q&A. So, Aoife, has everyone got access to the mic?
So we've got a Q&A section. People want to type something. If anybody wants to ask a question using their mic, just raise their hand and then I can unmute them.
Okay, so if we just give people a moment to ponder then, and if you'd like to ask a question, please do put it in the Q&A box, or just stick your hand up and we'll come to you.
I've got a question for you, Bev.
Mm-hmm.
She says, taking herself off mute. Sorry, Aoife. What's your greatest hope for the future of the Educator Network?
Well, so when we set about this, initially, the ask was to continue to build a resource for educators, and I think it was kind of assumed that it was already in place. But for BAPO, there wasn't an Educator Network. So this is kind of from a ground zero, I guess. So it's really starting off from nothing at all. And so it gives me absolute delight to come back in a couple of years' time and to see this thriving network of, you know, educators that have really grabbed hold of the opportunities, that have really kind of looked back at how they answered that survey, and to see that those things that they wished for had, you know, come through and the network to be vibrant, up and running, self-sustaining. I think that's really important. It will be great to see, the network members really taking ownership of the network and, leading the way. I think that's what's really important here. It's that you have, a whole raft of skills and that needs to be shared, and we need to shine a light on the brilliance of our practice educators who often don't get much limelight. So I'd like to change that, and I'd like it to be all about you, and I'd like it to really serve you well, and for you to feel that you have created this wonderful resource and community for each other, and that in itself will kind of help build momentum. So that would be my hopes and wishes. And I think we had a hand went up there. Who was that?
It's now Actam, I think. I'll allow your mic.
Hello.
Okay, please go ahead.
Hello.
Hello.
So my question involves an educator. Is there an age limit, or when is it called to be an educator, or when to use the resources of an educator, and like in general, and what is defined as an educator? I know it's vague. My apologies, but I'm trying my best.
I missed that last bit. What is the what of an educator?
How are we understanding an educator? How are we defining who an educator is, and when's it appropriate for somebody to access these resources?
Well, I mean, that's a great question, isn't it? Because I think sometimes we do kind of make assumptions about, how much experience you have to have, how many years practice you have to have behind you, what grade you need to be at. And actually, none of that really matters. And I think what's really important is that you get the appropriate support and training. And so on the Padlet, there's going to be signposting to some published resources, some published training programs for you to learn to be an educator. And I think, go on, Joe.
Sorry, I was just going to say, if you look at the BAPO career development framework, you'll see that the educator pillar is very much a part of every practitioner's skill set. That's part of what we're expected to develop in. So it's not just our technical and our practice patient facing skills we're thinking about. It's also those leadership skills, that engaging with research and being an educator. So wherever you are in your career journey, you can kind of map where your skills are on that educator pillar. And if you want to look even more closely at it, Bev has added the AHP educator framework to the Educator Network webpage. And that gives you some more insight into the types of skills that you might need to develop, where you're at, and where you can contribute to educating all sorts of different people at different phases in their careers or in their journey through your service.
And everyone has something to contribute. We've also done some work with the support workforce, and last year we published a support worker framework. And I think it's really important to say that actually support workers can be educators too. There is this misconception sometimes that actually you can only be an educator if you're a graduate prosthetist, orthotist, podiatrist, OT, but actually that's not the case. It's about appropriate level of experience at the right level, provided for the right level of learning, and that can come from everybody within the workforce. So I think it's really important point. Does that answer the question?
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Oh, good. You're welcome.
We have a question in the Q&A from Zia saying, if you're living in other countries, how can you benefit from the BAPO network and educational resources?
Wow. That's another great question.
Why not?
And I think, well, you can, you know, I mean, I don't know what other countries you might be referring to, but I guess there's two camps here. The first thing to say is that the resources that we've produced as a result of this programme of work won't be sitting behind a membership paywall, so they are freely available. So you will be able to access the majority of the resources produced on the BAPO website. They're going to be coming out over the next few months, so keep your eye on the website. But absolutely, I mean, have a good look through, and there's no reason, you know, we do need to expand our P&O workforce, and you know, we know that some of our prosthetists and orthotists are international learners, and you know, we know that actually P&O has a good you know, foothold in the international scene. So I would say that those resources are there, and if you think that they would be of benefit for you despite being in another country, use them. Yeah, why not? I would say. Anything else to add there, Joe?
No, I think you know, take advantage of these open access resources. It can only, I mean, if we take our gaze from looking at the UK profession to sort of the international profession, it can only support the continued growth and sustainability of what is a really, really important profession, not just in the UK, but internationally. So continuing to bolster the workforce supply wherever they might go feels like a really important thing, and we want the best quality, you know, the most capable practitioners entering practice wherever they are. So I can't see a reason why not to.
So I hope that's sufficient. Yes, Eva?
I haven't seen any of the raised hands, I don't think. I know you mentioned the start bit. Can you just repeat again when the resources that aren't available yet, when they will be available for people?
Friday this week at some point. Not 100% certain exactly when, but it will be Friday. Yeah.
Perfect. Anyone else like to ask any more questions? Is
there someone here how one can contribute to the BAPO Great Work? Is that how can?
That was the question about living abroad. I think Zia has just raised their hands. Do you want to follow up on that question?
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for the wonderful presentation. It's my questions. I just wanted to ask you that how we can contribute to the BAPO Great Work, because you are doing a great job. I have been like watching your webinar for last few weeks. So my question is that how we can contribute, how we can be a part of BAPO. Thank you very much.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's lots in there. So how can you be a part of BAPO? Well, if you're, you can register to be a member of BAPO. So, and there's, I'm sure that if you're interested in doing that, Aoife and Krista can put some information in the chat about how to do that. If you really want to pick up on Joe's suggestion, then we can help you. If you're interested in doing one of our webinar events, then we would support you to do that. And, you know, we can help you with the planning of that. You can also help by sharing the resources. If you found them useful, then, you know, share the love and tell people about BAPO and tell people how good you think the resources are that you're finding on the website, and how you think this is helping sustain the profession. So there's lots of different ways of helping and being part of it. You don't have to be particularly active. It might just be about sharing information, sharing links, or you could, if you wanted to, be very active and do things like the webinar event. So there's a whole spectrum of ways to get involved.
And I would also... Sorry, I would also join the committees, because there's several committees. So if you were interested in joining one of the committees, you can email, I think Aoife can put it in the chat, inquiries@bapo.com, and we can send you information about what committees you can volunteer on as well. Sorry, Jo.
No, I no problems. I was just going to say, and keep an eye out for general calls for people to get involved in developing resources or contributing to working groups and that kind of thing as well. I'm sure your perspective would be welcomed.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. You're very welcome. Okay, now we have just about run out of time. So I think it's been a fabulous an hour and 30 minutes that's whizzed by. So thank you so much to Jo. Thank you so much to Gemma, to Aoife and to Krista. And for all of our audience, thank you so much for turning out tonight and to listen to what we had to say. I hope you found it useful. Do make use of those links, and please do share the resources. Shout about BAPO, shout about what you like about it. Yeah, lovely to be here tonight and to talk to you all.
Thank you very much, Bev, Jo and Gemma. Fantastic webinar this evening. Huge amount of work that you've all done, you know, in the past year or more, and very well presented in a short period of time. So thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you to everybody for attending. As I put the email, and if you have any feedback or anything, please feel free to contact us at those email addresses. Have a lovely evening. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good evening.